You have nightmares?
Every soldier has nightmares.
Only one who is ashamed of what he has done.
You have no idea what I have done.
Our bodies are given life in the midst of nothingness. Existing when there is nothing is the meaning of the phrase, form is emptiness. And all things are provided for by nothingness is the meaning of the phrase, emptiness is form. One should not think that these are two separate things.
You do not fear death, but sometimes you wish for it. Is this not so?
Yes.
And welcome to Dharma from the Ghetto. The first noble truth of life is that it contains inevitable, unavoidable suffering. This suffering encompasses the gross forms of pain, illness, trauma we can all imagine, such as a broken leg, a stomach ache, grappling with the devastation of a hurricane, or the violent death of a loved one, or getting diagnosed with a terminal disease. It also encompasses mild but common forms of discomfort, distress, like long hours of work, feeling let down by a partner, headache, feeling frustrated, disappointment, emotional hurt, feelings of inadequacy or depression, or feeling upset. And past that, it also encompasses more subtle forms of pain, tension of the mind, restlessness, a sense of contraction, preoccupation, being uneased, boredom, a sense of being isolated, something missing in your life, or just something not feeling right. So, as we get into the first noble truth, it brings me to when I first began to understand this concept of life is suffering. When I first heard it, I understood the most elementary form of it. Like I thought about all the things that had ever hurt me and was just like, yeah, life is full of fucked up pain. But as I began to study, I started to understand and realize that this term life is suffering doesn't mean that the totality of life itself is meant to hurt you or cause suffering. I started to realize, as I read deeper into these philosophies, that when you think of suffering, it really comes from a place of holding on and clinging to something. One of the hardest things that I had to come to terms with and accept, in my journey and my studying was that nothing is permanent. Everything has a beginning and an end. And it is this holding on to something and clinging and the wanting for it that derives the negative emotions that we feel. It's like being on a job that was very comfortable. You may not have liked it. You damn sure may not have loved it, but it was comfortable. The pay allowed you to live with minimal, sacrifice. The hours were cool. The commute was cool. And it lulls you into this sense of comfort. And then you lost that job, whether the job closed up, whether you got fired, whether you got laid off. Regardless of how you lost it, the loss of that job created a sense of suffering And a lot of times it is hard to look at that situation and realize you're suffering over something that didn't even make you happy. You're suffering over something that barely kept you surviving. It just kept you surviving in this nice little box of comfort. You know, there are so many situations in our life to where us holding on to something creates that negative feeling. You know, whether it's with friends or family or in relationships, it is very hard for us to accept the time that we have and the time that we've been given, especially in this country. In this country, there is a lot about our culture that embeds this thought of we deserve. And the idea of deserving is also very much connected to this. When you feel like you deserve something, almost everything else creates a feeling of lacking, non-accomplishment, creates this feeling of loss over something you don't even have and you haven't even done the work for. Just a little example. I've been on a date and I've had a woman tell me, well, I deserve a good man and I deserve a man who's going to work and come home and treat me like a queen and this, and that. And, you know, as I looked in her face, I seen like there was this concrete sense and belief in that. Like it was to her core. She believed she deserved this. And I'm not saying she didn't or she did. I'm just saying this was her belief. And I asked her, well, why do you deserve that? Why do you feel you deserve this kind of man? And in my thought, I was more thinking along the lines of what are the qualities that you have to offer that allows you to deserve, you know, the qualities in a partner like this that you want. But when she answered the question, she said, I deserve it because I've always been a good woman. And every nigga that I done fucked with and dogged me out, I stand by them and I'm loyal and I cook and clean and this and that. And I really kind of had to apologize within myself because at that point of the conversation, I kind of drifted off into a separate thoughts of this is often how we determine for ourselves what we deserve. You know, it's like you did a good job working for this company. So when you get to this next company, you feel like this next company automatically should do X, Y, and Z and pay you a certain amount because of the work you did for another company. And I really thought about how we string together wants and desires in our life over our lifetime. If you know, a lot of us know older people who have put 15, 20 years on the job. That creates this sense of I deserve, and that kind of filters into every part of their life, and you can kind of see it every time they feel like they've been wronged or they feel like they've been overlooked or skipped or done unfairly. It all attaches back to that. Your job has very little to do with anything else. And the way that we construct our emotions around these type of things really creates so much of an issue, you know, in our life to where, you know, your job is irrelevant to how you raise your kids, how you have a relationship, how you deal with friends and family, and how they reciprocate your friendship and love. But a lot of times, man, it's hard for us to separate monumental emotion in our life from other things. You know, you see it in a lot of people who have kind of created this chasm of misery that they live in. Everything is wrong, everything is somebody else and somebody else's fault. And, they live in this just valley of bullshit of these are the things that I should have and I deserve them. And a lot of that word deserve, I don't think people understand. Deserve comes from work. So, yes, you may deserve more at work because of the work that you put in and the quality of work, but you deserve what you get. And that also has to translate individually in your life. You cannot feel like you deserve friendship from your friends when you don't put into that friendship, when you don't reciprocate or give or participate the way that you should. I know a lot of people, they never go out with their friends. Like, they have a group of friends that they build. For some reason, they get to this area of their life to where they don't go out with them. They don't spend time with them. When a friend is in need, they're never really there to help. But they still have this sense of, you should give me. You should love me and be there for me. And it doesn't work that way. I have struggled with this term in my younger years, and it took a lot to realize that I wasn't doing the work to deserve anything. I wasn't walking through life in a manner that deserved me anything more than what I was getting, and I think we all have some level of issue with this when we're younger because we don't want to do the work. We don't want to be mindful of how we talk to people, how we walk through life. A lot of people don't want to be mindful of how we interact with the universe around us. We just want things to be what the fuck we want them to be, and we expect it like that. I'll tell you this, man, I remember sitting in juvenile hall, Martinez Juvenile Hall, right? I'm like maybe 14, 15 years old. And I get busted for some shit that I did with, some of my brothers. And I remember sitting in my cell, and there's always this conversation that happens when you go to jail and you get bunked up, you get put in your cell. There's this conversation that you have with your cellmate where you both are kind of filling each other out and really kind of seeing what the dynamics are going to be like between you two in this cell. And part of that conversation is, why are you here? What did you do? So I remember sitting in my cell talking to my bunkie, and I think this was like the first time I ever really peeked this out, and it was a conscious thought in my mind. As he's telling me the shit that he did, and I don't necessarily remember the individual crimes, but it was just a lot of teenage hood bullshit, a couple of thefts and burglaries. He had some issues at home, destruction of property, he's kind of wilding out. But and the point to all of this is everything that he was saying, he kept saying, and I did this, and it was her fault. She made me do it. And everything was linked back to somebody else. Somebody else's behavior made him lash out. And I remember just having that thought of like, nigga, you did everything. Because I was really looking for some shit in what he was saying to kind of justify his point. When he got to talking about why he fucked up his house and the shit that his mama was doing, I'm thinking to myself, nigga, that's some basic shit. Like, I don't know too many parents who don't try to make you go to bed at a certain time, make sure your ass go to school every day. But his reaction to these like basic parenting things was to lash out violently. And I think it was the first time I ever looked at a nigga in his face and go, nah, you're exactly where the fuck you need to be. And from that thought of looking at this other kid and going, no, you deserve to be here. Everything you did landed your ass here and should have landed your ass here. An epiphany hit me. And I realized I was exactly where the fuck I should have been. The crimes that I committed, nobody made me do that shit. Nobody forced me to commit those acts, selling dope and doing whatever. Like, I did that shit. I made a choice to do that shit. I may have been a kid, but it was a conscious choice. And I was exactly where the fuck I should have been. And this may sound stupid to some people, but that time that I served in that instance felt very different from any other time I had been in jail, up to that point. I had found acceptance in my consequence. And I realized that, and I kind of realized this later on as I got older, that was like a turning point in the trajectory of my life. Because at that point, when I got out, I started to really think a lot more about the decisions that I was making and the end of it. When I go back to when I was a counselor, after I got out of the streets and all that, I've been many forms of a counselor: substance abuse, case managed with, chronic homeless. I've worked as an employment specialist, vocational counselor, all these different kind of nonprofit avenues. But I think back to a term that we used to use. One of the terms that we used was play the tape to the end, right? And this was a coping mechanism to help addicts think about the full scope of their relapse. You know what I mean? Like, there's a moment before an addict relapse where there is this thought process that they go through to make the decision to just say, fuck it. So we use this term called play the tape to the end. In that moment, when you're thinking about relapsing, think about what can happen with you going to buy some dope or buy some liquor. What can happen that first time that you use? A lot of times as an addict, we think about relapsing and we think about what it is in the accomplishment of being high or being drunk. We don't really think about, in the act of going to buy these drugs, I could get arrested and fuck off everything I've built since I've been clean and sober. In the act of buying this alcohol, I may not be strong enough to hold this bottle in my car until I get home or wherever I'm going to drink, which I could get a DUI. I could hit somebody. I could kill somebody. The act of thinking about what happens once you relapse. Could you really stop? Could you really pull it back? Will it just be one time, or will you end up on a bender? What will that bender do to your life? What will your partner think and how will they feel? Your kids, your job, your social network as far as friends. So we use this term, play the tape out, to think about not just the action, but the whole situation, the totality of it, and what's going to happen at the end. When I think about the concept of life is suffering, and I want to bring it back to that because all of what I've talked about has a connection to it. If you can get to a space in your mind to where you understand fundamentally to your core, nobody has to do anything for you. You don't inherently deserve anything. You can get to a place of appreciation that very few people have, meaning you begin to understand to have something in your life, you have to put in the work for that. And I know we always use a term or terms in this country of, hard work will get you ahead and this, and that. But the actuality of that and the work that it takes in your entire life, it's just not going to work and doing a specific task or duty that's placed in front of you. It's how do you deal with your coworkers? How do you interact with your boss? How do you interact with whatever customer base you may have for whatever company you work for? When you get home, what is the work that you put in with your kids? What is the work that you put in with your partner? What is the work that you put in with your friends? As you actually think about that and begin to put in work that you're supposed to, like you're supposed to actively work at being a better person, a better version of yourself every day. That's something you should be doing. You don't have to. I mean, you could walk through life being a fucking dick and an asshole to everybody. But what that will earn you is immense suffering. Nobody wants to reach out a hand of comfort or help to a fucking asshole. So when you think about the work you want to put in, it's about your overall attitude. It's about your compassion, your empathy, and your love that you put into that time, effort, and work with the people around you and with the whole fucking universe around you, because you walk through this shit. Nobody walks through life unaffecting things or unaffecting people. When you go home, in your home, anybody who lives in your home, you should interact with these people with straight love and compassion and empathy and sympathy and care and concern. But that's not often how we interact with the people that we live with. We pull in the stress from the day and let that affect how we speak and love our own friends, family, and children. So as I wrap up this episode, this podcast, I want you to think about, what suffering do you feel? Actually think about the core of it. When you walk through your life tomorrow, when you go into your job, when you have that conversation with your partner that you don't feel is sufficient anymore, and you have those things, those thoughts of maybe we should break up or maybe this has ran its course, I want you to think about those feelings and what is it that you could do that's going to change what comes to you. Meaning, if your job causes you stress and problems and unhappiness, what work could you put out there to change that? Is there a different attitude that you could have in your job that's going to create a better outcome for you with your coworkers and how your work flows? Is there a different attitude that you can carry in life that will cause a change in how people treat you? Think about the suffering that you feel and the part you play in that. And what is it that you can put out that's going to change what comes back to you? Because every form of suffering that you feel, there is an equal and opposite feeling to that. If suffering exists, so does happiness. What is the path from suffering to happiness? These are the things you need to think about throughout your day. Don't just feel some fucked up feeling and be stuck in that. Think about, what can I affect to change this? This feels fucked up and I don't like it. What is it that I can do to turn this completely around? How do I get from this negative to a positive? As you actively think about that, I guarantee you, your mind is going to tell you and show you a whole bunch of ways out of that. A whole bunch of ways that you can change things. So, the first noble truth, life is suffering. The next podcast I will do will be about the second noble truth, which is our desires is the cause of our suffering. Namaste. Salam. Peace. Until next time.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup. It becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
To know life in every breath, every cup of tea, every life we take. The way of the warrior. Life in every breath. That is Bushido.